Hi everyone, thanks for joining the Atman show, and I have very special guest. Subhash Kak is a Padma Shri awardee, and he's come to my shows a couple times, actually more than a couple times. And Sangita Iyer is a filmmaker. So Sangita, why don't you go ahead and give a brief description about yourself, and then we'll move on to Subhash Kak, sir.
Thank you for having me, Anamika. Pleasure to be back here. Not much to tell about me. I wear multiple hats. One of a filmmaker. I'm a writer and a director of documentaries, and I am also president of a nonprofit that was recently formed, Shakti Foundation, where we focus on work under education, compassion, and environment. So that's the focus. My most important job, I feel, is that of being a mother. So there you go. That's a little bit about me.
So, sir, can you please go ahead and talk about yourself before we begin the question answer session?
Okay, my name is Subhash Kak, and as Anamika said, I have appeared on our show several times, and I am an academic, worked on science, history, as well as on Indian social organization, and I've written two books or three books in the past year on India. One of them is called The Idea of India. The second is Eternal Bharat, and the third is called Whispers from the Past, Art and Wisdom of Kashmir. And the third book, the context is that I'm a Kashmiri.
All right, so today's topic is caste system. My first question to both the guests, why did the caste system develop in India?
I'll let the scholar go first.
Okay.
Okay, well, first of all, what is the caste system? The word caste is a Portuguese word, represents class. And in fact, in any of the Indian languages, there is no word which is exactly the same as the Portuguese caste, which is, of course, used in English as well. Now, the words that are used in Indian languages, say in Sanskrit, are jati and varna. Jati, of course, is one's lineage, family, or whatever. And you have jatis all over the world. Everybody, no matter in what part of the world, is part of a jati, has ancestors, parents, grandparents, etc., or a ethnic group. And Varna is a theoretical scheme which goes back to Purusha Sukta, which says that this is four classes of people based on their temperament. But what's interesting is in the Purusha Sukta, it's stated that from the primeval Purush, this is a personification of Brahman. From the primeval Purush were born the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas or Rajanakas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. But and from the head were born the Brahmins. But every text that we have says that within each individual is the Atman, which is the Purush. Within each individual, between each living being is the Purush. And therefore, the capacity to create any of these classes is within each individual, no matter what jati they are from. In fact, my own view on it, and I've written on it, including in an anthropological journal, and you can Google it, an essay called Understanding Caste in India, which appeared in, I believe, 1992. I've argued that all the four varnas are inherent within each individual. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that uh, certain classes or certain jatis did not say that we are this varna or that varna. That might be true, but we must place all that in context because let's not forget that until, according to comparative economists, until about 1000, India's share of the world economy was about 35%. Until 1800, it was about 20%. And after the English came, India's share of the world economy plunged from 20% to about 1.8% around 1914. So the 19th century, India became so impoverished. There was so much of famines which were created by policy. They've been called late Victorian Holocaust, according to some estimates. as many as 100 million people died. So various jatis turned on each other. When you're hungry, when you're starving, then the question of cruelty can come in. So we got to place this in context because theoretically or fundamentally, there is no difference in Indian social organization and social organization elsewhere. And when Megasthenes, the ambassador, the Greek ambassador came to India during the Mauryan times, he didn't talk about these four varnas. He said there were seven occupational classes. So I think what has happened in India is the colonial lens was used to talk about Indian social organization, and especially the 1901 census, which forcibly pegged certain jatis to certain varnas. And these guys said, we don't know what you're talking about, but the English census taker said, no, you are this particular varna. So, and the chief of census, an Englishman, famously complained. He says, we speak of the caste system in India, but it's we who have created it by this forced correlation. So to tie it up, my take of Indian social organization is that, of course, India is a complex society with ritual and this and that, which goes back very, very far into the past. And there were different communities. And India's social organization was also decentralized. So there were legal system was administered by different jatis. And therefore, to an outsider, it appeared that maybe there was something very unique, but in reality, it wasn't. If you look at it, in fact, there's a very famous um, essay by the great Sri Lankan Indologist named Ananda Kumaraswamy, where he speaks of how in the village in India, the jati which was predominant was that of the carpenter, not the Brahmin. You should read this. In fact, if you Google it,
Yeah.
you'll find it. And so this is actual stuff. And the idea that Brahman was at the top was fostered by Western theoreticians. They said, head of Purush means Brahman at the top. That's not the case. It was the dominant community who had the money where the transaction took place. The community which gave the money to others was higher than others. So it's I think it's being increasingly recognized now that the stuff that we read about caste is half truth and perhaps very, very misleading.
Sangita, you do have to say.
Y- Yeah, not much to add, but couldn't agree more. And like I said, I'm still learning about this. It's such a complex topic that we as Indians also don't understand it in its completion, and that's why it becomes that more dangerous when there are others who don't even have that kind of knowledge discussing caste. And the example that Dr. Kak just gave about the Brahmins being the head and Shudras being the leg, if I'm not wrong, that was more so used as a metaphor. It was not to be taken literally, which is how it's translated now. Um, and so it's, to me, when I think of it as like a head is equally important as so is a leg, right? Like when you think of our body, are we okay without being able to walk or have our legs? So also from what I understand, caste was never a Sanskrit word, right? It never existed. So it was more division of labor. I have not read the Vedas. I'm making an effort to. I've started reading them to get a better understanding. I'm reading a book I'm reading about Dr. Ambedkar too, because I really want to take a deeper dive into this topic, especially because it's being weaponized. Caste is being weaponized in North America now, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to make a short film on what transpired here a few months ago. So it's been fascinating to learn about it. And the more I read, the more I feel like I don't know anything about it. So I have to agree. And then about the British too, I mean, yes, they didn't, maybe they didn't start it, they didn't, it existed as Jati Varna in India, but they surely inflamed it and exploited it. And I think we're seeing the impact of that even today, that colonial impact of caste.
So, as per Subhash Kak, he says that Atman is the most important thing, right? So, do you think at some point in time, okay, if we say that it was division of labor, So do you think at some point of time it was exploited? No, Mughals and British came very late. It was just exploited by us Indians only.
Well, as Sangeeta very rightly said, it's a metaphor. And when you say foundation, the feet are the foundation. And who is the deity of the feet? It's Vishnu. Vishnu is the foundation, right? So, metaphors, when they are taken literally, create all kinds of problems, even in modern times. Now, clearly, the social organization, as I've already mentioned, was different within India because of its population and the decentralization. Now, it's also true that certain communities in the late Puranic period uh, lived apart from certain other communities. And the Indologist Basham, in his book, The Wonder of India, suggests, people who were called Antiyaj, who were said you can't have commerce with the rest of us. And Basham argues that this may have happened subsequent to the rise of Buddhism, when certain trades, such as leather work or
Mm.
skinning of animals, etc., were frowned upon. Were not frowned upon. The people, those guys were not to mix with the others. Now, what's the argument in support of it? Because one might say, hey, aren't you trying to just provide some kind of an argument to come, get out of uh, this big issue? Well, in Japan, in Korea, in China, in Japan particularly, also people who did these trades were called, were termed untouchables and so on. I think they even now, I forget the exact name for this, but you can find this out. So trade might have been a factor, the kind of trades that you applied. Now, but I personally think, if you look at royal genealogies, most of the kings all across India were from the Shudra, so-called Shudra community, including the Mauryas, the great Mauryas. So there was no such thing that royalty was to come from one or the other. In fact, it was also stated that you don't look past 2 or 3 generations. And then depending upon what you do, and also most importantly, your temperament. Now, another interesting sidelight to this is that there is a certain community in Tamil Nadu uh, who's supposed to have left West India about 1,000 years ago, and they came down, and we have documents about their history onto the present time. Now, that's one of the most successful communities in Tamil Nadu. And apparently, 1,000 years ago, people termed them as Shudra, then they became Vaishya, and so on. And now they're called Brahmins because they slowly, along the journey, became, you know, made further constraints on their own food habits, etc. Because it's normally accepted that, well, if you are in the if you're a Brahmin, then you're probably going to be a vegetarian, which is not, of course, no, universally true, because the Bengali Brahmins eat fish and Kashmiri Brahmins eat meat and everything. So, but by and large, it's true. So this particular community in Madurai now have become vegetarian, and so it's really, there's no formula, there is no general rule, and this was communities doing various things based on social situation, social economic situation in the region historically. And some people got into education and then they started identifying with something, or some people got into business, and then they focused on the values associated with that. So to come back, personally, as far as my own understanding, as I grew up in Kashmir, and my observations of social organization within India, India is not really all that different. Indian, social life is not all that different from that of any other part of the world, and which we see, say, Indians who have come to the West. You find that they're exactly like anybody else. They intermarry with various groups, and this intermarriage depends upon where young men and women find some commonality. And this whole thing about the caste, which is being weaponized, as Sangita said, partly is a consequence of the enormous success that Indians have had all over the world. Indians, according to some research, are the most successful community, the wealthiest community in the US, and most successful in UK as well, and presumably in Canada as well. So with this, there is jealousy, etc. There are groups which want to pull Indians a peg or down, a peg or two down. And so they created this controversy out of nothing.
So, Sangeeta, what do you think that do you think we Indians actually exploited this labor system, whatever we had created? Not caste was not there back then.
I'm no expert, but I think we have to take some responsibility that we did, we had to take some responsibility for where we are at today with regards to caste, right? So, yes, the British played a big part and the Mughals played a big part, but I think so did we. And I feel like personally, I mean, obviously, I'm absolutely against the caste system. I feel it should be abolished. I mean, just do it. And I also believe that how do we do this is we don't talk about it. I mean, I don't mean here literally, but you know what I mean, that it comes up in conversations. It's still practice. Now, Dr. Kark made an interesting point. I was listening to him and it made me think of a book I had read and I made a note of it. It's called The Colonial Origins of Ethnic Violence in India. And one of the things the author did there is he shows through like a quantitative analysis how, the legacies of British colonialism, are responsible even for the contemporary conflicts we see today. But one point he made was that, and there was an in-depth study. It showed that how the British incited caste conflict compared to the princely states in India. So I was born and raised in India. And it kind of makes sense to me now because I grew up in a place which was technically a princely state. I did not know about caste growing up. There was no conversation about caste where I was growing up, at least with my friends, family, and school. And it is interesting. There are people who I come across who still say that that's a topic of discussion. Caste comes up in pretty much everything, be it traditions and policies, and and we see it in politics even today. So it's a I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a very gray area for me personally. It never came up, and absolutely it's not in the vocabulary when it comes to my children here. Or even if you say second, third generation North Americans here, I don't think they know what caste is. That's not the word used in their vocabulary.
But actually, in my experience, I still see that, people like, oh, we are Brahmins. We are not going to marry someone who's not a Brahmin. I mean, even though that person is educated or, good
Yes.
person, I still don't understand that comment. And still, I hear it in my generation as well.
I agree with you, and I've heard it too. Because if you see my last name, sometimes I'll get asked that question: "Is Iyer?" That, oh, you're a Brahmin, and I'm like, well, oh, kinda. Okay, I'm married to an Iyer, or I'm not an Iyer. So, but this doesn't cross my mind, but it crosses the mind of people when they bring it up. And you're right. That's why I say it should be completely abolished. Like, why do we even have that as part of our discussion? Are you a Brahmin? Are you not? And I know sometimes I'll be talking to my husband, and he raises a very good point, and he says that if you think about how we are in North America, we pretty much do the work on a daily basis of all, right? You operate as a Brahmin, as a Kshatriya, as a Vaishnava, and a Shudra based on the classification. We do that in our everyday roles every day.
Yeah.
Anyways, so it maybe, like I said, it's probably, if it's your generation, I'm not sure if it's coming from the previous generation, but I'm speaking as a mother, and my children, if you ask them caste, they look at you, say, huh, what's that? So do his friends. So, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully we are on the path of, there's a quote by Morgan Freeman that comes to mind. I think it goes something like, how do you stop racism? He says, stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man, and I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. And it kind of applies to the caste system too, right? And
I,
because of these kind of conversations that are happening, like you said, even now, not everyone, most of us are not like that, but whatever little percentage, or even rural areas, or let's say politicians using it, this is also, I think, what gives people the fuel to weaponize caste.
I think Sangita's quoting of Morgan Freeman's thing is absolutely spot on. The more you talk about it, but then, if you go back and you read the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says very clearly that the Varna classification is according to one's temperament, not by birth. It's nothing to do with birth. See, Bhagavad Gita is the iconic book of Vedic knowledge. It summarizes all the Vedic knowledge. If Bhagavad Gita says that Varna is not by birth, why are we keeping on talking about it again and again and again? And to that extent, we are responsible. To that extent, we are responsible. And I also agree. And in my understanding caste in India, 1992 paper, I say big emphatically, everybody is the same Atman, and from this Atman, or from this Purush and Atman mean the same thing. From this Purush emerge all the four different propensities or capacities for reflection, capacities for action, capacities for bringing things together, and capacity for service. And let's also not forget that deriding service uh, is something that is also done reflexively by people who don't really think through. Even the path to knowledge is through service. If you go to an ashram, go to a really wise man, he would say, and you say, I want to learn something, he would say, okay, work in the kitchen or do something, do seva. Seva is the way. Humility is the way to wisdom. Arrogance, and the Bhagavad Gita also stresses it, arrogance is the way to darkness. And so we have turned everything upside down in common discourse in our school books, and then people are being fed these words as if these words themselves are poisonous, and that's what they become.
So on a lighter note, now that AI is coming and robots, and so they are going to do all the service, so robots will become Shudra. So
No, who will be humans? We are all Shudras. Every human
Yes.
being must do service. That's the only way. And certainly we have all these four roles, everybody. When you reflect on who you are at that moment, and every human being reflects sometime or the other, you are a Brahman who is absorbed in Brahman, in the mystery.
Yes.
That's what Brahman means. Kshatriya, you have to act. If you don't
Mm.
act, you won't be able to find food for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You are a Kshatriya. You are a Vaishya. And the word Vish, of course, means who pervade everywhere. We are
Mm-hmm.
all, in that sense, Vaishyas, and we have to do all that we have to do in society. And finally, from the perspective of, psychological interaction with everybody else, we must serve others. That's the only way to happiness. If you don't serve others in one's own family and in the larger community, you have set yourself up for misery and suffering. So the
Absolutely.
way out is just the opposite of what we are being told.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, education is important, and to your point, I feel like when my interactions, I began this journey when I started to understand. I mean, I never faced this caste word growing up in India, but I'm starting to hear it now. It blows my mind that, I mean, aren't we evolving as the human race? This feels like we are going back. And so I started to dig deeper. But what I come across in my most interactions is people don't have the knowledge to challenge or debate when it's thrown at them. This is where the issue is here is they'll come and throw the caste, and obviously there's a big group of people who are sitting, and maybe this is out of context from what you asked me, but I'm just saying that those who support Dr. Ambedkar, I mean, he talked about annihilation of caste, right? And we support it. But the so-called Ambedkarites today who are sitting in academia, in elite institutions are not fighting for the annihilation of caste. They are exploiting it. So how are they following him and his philosophy?
Yeah.
Right. And I think we've got to go back to the whole issue of there being no equivalent to the word caste
Yes.
in any Indian language. Now, of course, we all have jatis. Sangita's has a certain jati. She has a family, her parents, etc. And I have a jati. My jati is Kashmiri, right? So I can't deny that. We don't have to annihilate jati because we can't. That's part of our biological inheritance. But the word caste means nothing in any Indian language. If it doesn't mean anything, that's why it's got the flexibility to imprison you, because here you're using a concept for which there is no equivalent at all. And that's the source of the problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, I loved the analogy that my husband gave, because I told my children, use this. This is perfect analogy, because you don't have to have the expertise. I don't even want them to know about caste. I mean, why even go down that path? I said, this is a perfect example that your dad gave. Is like, what are you? Say, I am everything, because I'm practicing this every day. I mean, when I'm, teaching and I'm educating and I'm training people or teaching my children, I'm wearing the hat of a Brahmin. I'm looking out for my family, protecting them. I'm a Kshatriya. My husband, when he's running his organization, I run my non-profit. I am a Vaishnav. And when I'm cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry, I'm doing the labor work. So aren't we doing all of the above anyways?
And not just you, every human being,
Yeah.
no matter from what jati, of what status, is doing all these four.
Yes.
And therefore, I think we really have to go back to our founding or great documents like the Bhagavad Gita, which
Mm-hmm.
stresses again and again that it has nothing to do with the birth. What your temperament. Now, of course, there could be somebody who are more inclined to one thing or the other. There are some people who are born to be professors. Right now, you might
Yes.
say, okay, this is what his temperament is. There are some young people from the same family who say, well, we want to be in the army.
Yeah.
And those things are also true. Those are general social classes. We are not talking of individuals there. Every individual has all these four propensities. But socially, because the whole country or a society has specialized actions, you've got to have the military, you've got to have the professorial class, you have to have workers in factories, etc. So socially, there is something larger. You can say the whole society is like a human being. It's a metaphor. It doesn't mean that that's what it is. And there you can say this ideally. If you have time to kill, you'll say, hey, let's talk about what particular metaphor is appropriate for this particular thing. But in reality, at the individual level, doesn't make sense to talk about it. Go Morgan Freeman. I
Yes.
totally. He's
Yeah.
the guy who's shown us the light.
Yeah, that quote always, whenever I hear of caste, that always pops to mind, which is I want to share today. And
Right.
I mean, we talk about, like you said, Atman. This is such a central tenet of Hindu philosophy, right? And really, it can play such a significant role in addressing and eventually, hopefully, abolishing this whole system. I mean, there's the spiritual and the philosophical education. It can help promote inclusivity. You can bring social reform. You can have interfaith dialogue, collaboration. It can be used in legislative and policy intervention. We can promote. I mean, this whole concept, this Hindu concept of Atman, is just so beautiful. But the thing is, it's not being maximized. It's being used, caste. I call it the three C's: the caste cow curry that's thrown at us every opportunity they get. And I think we just don't have the knowledge and the solid foundation. Like even the Bhagavad Gita that you referred to, Dr. Kak, how many of us have read it inside out and understand the Bhagavad Gita? I mean, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, I wish I grew up. I'm making another film that I started filming last year on the education system, which is like an extension of my previous one that was very well received. So I'm taking a deeper dive. I know I had happened to read The Beautiful Tree by Dharmpal Ji.
Hmm.
I started visiting certain gurukuls. I went and stayed at one for a couple of days in Bangalore, Vidya Kshetra. And I'm telling you, I feel cheated of my own education system. When I saw what the kids were learning there, I was like,
Hmm.
I wish, not only just for my kid, but I wish I could go and do some learning there, because these are going to be like very healthy, resilient individuals that they're raising, grounded in dharma. I didn't know much about the Bhagavad Gita till I delve into reading more about it. So that is also an unfortunate part where our education system became so colonized and it never changed that we didn't learn Sanskrit. If Sanskrit was mandatory, I think we would all be so much more equipped to read and learn and challenge these things that we're facing today. It's sad.
And as Sangeeta, you said, the resolution to the social problems that we face around the world related to exploitation or oppression or racism is in the Vedic idea of Atman. Every human being, irrespective of their background or race, has the same Atman. In fact, the idea of racism or the idea of races is not an Indian idea at all. It's a European idea,
Yes.
18th or 17th century. In India, they never talked about, what is somebody's race. We only talk about jati. And jati is, of course, your familial lineage. And that is, of course, going to be true for anybody. So I think the resolution is in the idea of the Atman, which binds all of humanity, in fact, all of life, which also gives us the capacity to have compassion not only for each other, but also for other living beings. This is something that's been forgotten in the Western system where the mechanical way animals are raised and slaughtered, it's
Yes.
horrifying. It's horrifying. So we don't think about it because we go to the grocery store and everything is plastic wrapped. And I think this young people think that this is how
Yeah.
animals are created. I think we need to go beyond and confront the larger issues, which is dividing not only people from other people, but also dividing humans from other animals. They also need respect. They also need love and compassion, and we have totally forgotten them.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because this is like me being an avid, huge animal lover, and one of the umbrellas that Shakti focuses on is that compassion for all living beings. I've practically turned a vegan because of what I learned about abuse, cruelty towards animals, and I advocate for the animals all the time. It's a running joke in my family too that if she was asked to pick an animal over a human, she would go pick the animal. But I mean, it's something it's not something I planned for. It's a deep organic connection that I am not able to see cruelty towards animals, and I'm trying to focus on that through the work we do at a nonprofit, where I think we need to inculcate these values of compassion since they are children. In fact, I feel children are born compassionate and then society conditions them to be otherwise. So how do we kind of bring that, even the environment, we've lost connection to nature, we've lost connection, like you said, to other living beings. And you're very right, we don't understand where that food is coming from. We get it from the grocery store, it's on our plate, but how did it get to our plate? So a lot of things going wrong. I guess that is what Kali Yuga is all about. I
So
don't know.
not eating animals, but also animal abuse can happen through zoo, through SeaWorld,
Everything.
animal experimentation in Harvard. Those kind of things can.
Everything. Cosmetics, I mean, we could do a whole session on this. Like, there's so much data information that I've collected, and we work on that. Is that you're right, there's an amazing documentary, and the name's not coming to mind right now, I'll share later, but it was eye-opening to see how humans, I mean, we are the most intelligent species, but we seem to be the least compassionate as well. And we are exploiting animals in every way, shape, and form, not just food. Absolutely.
Okay, so now moving on to our next topic. Regardless of the significant social reform, the deep-rooted caste system prevails in landscape of Kerala and many other states. The extreme oppression that the Dalit community faced forced them to seek a new identity with religious conversion. The caste system acted as a mechanism to oppress people in the lowest rung. The perpetual deprivation forced people to construct an identity of the society. The former untouchable caste Dalit sought a resort in Christianity with the missionary movement. So, how can we resolve the oppression so that people can reap the real benefit of Hinduism? So, because of all these oppression, people have a hatred towards Hinduism and they are going to
Mm,
somewhere else. So if you don't resolve this, people are not going to reap the benefits of what Bhagavad Gita says, because they'll say, oh, Bhagavad Gita, this is like oppression, this is like caste system. So what do you have to say on that?
Well, one can talk about the past in so many different ways. The past is all stories. You can say such and such things happened, or there was mass slavery, for centuries, when the Turks came. So there's you can build victimhood narratives, and they're based partly on some truth, but that's not the way to move forward. The move forward is to look at the present, and then acknowledge that we are all the same, we are all equal, and then move forward. Because you can have all kinds of stories. There are also stories of how the Christians came to Goa and slaughtered so many people. All the Brahmins were crucified, etc., because they won't convert. So we can cry endlessly for one community or the other. So I think that does not help the narrative at all. Our constitution gives equal rights to everybody. All the dharma gurus that we have in India, because if you approach it from the perspective of Hinduism, would say that everybody is equal. And let people read these texts for themselves. You read the Bhagavad Gita and you read other texts, and they'll say everybody, the varna, as far as varna is concerned, that is flexible. That depends upon your own temperament. And jatis, all jatis are equal. Now, of course, that's not to say that there may not be some communities in India who are very orthodox, who take a narrow view. So we just ignore them. What is the general view? What is the sensible view? It's this view of equality. It's this view that the same Atman within everybody, well, which is otherwise we wouldn't be alive. Everybody is alive. So that's not even a question. So I think let's not, I think this particular question about why Christianity has come as a relief to some people, I think it's irrelevant. Christianity
Yeah.
has also been a source, let's not forget,
Uh,
of the greatest massacres all across the world, the North Americas, the South Americas, the huge, it's horrific. Or you read the book called The Darkening Age, which talks about the destruction of art in Europe itself after it became Christian. So let's not look into the past at all. Not helpful.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, just as Ambedkarism talks about pushing back and moving away from caste. I mean, from what little I know, I think Hindutva does the same. It is talking about pushing back against caste, and you want to focus on coming together, like Dr. Kak said, and unity and equality is what the focus is, and that's what we need to focus on going forward. We each person in our individual capacity also, I think, can educate, empower people through knowledge, whatever little we can, right? So if I know what I know, then I share it with five other people who bring this caste thing up. Sometimes it's simple things like, little everyday conversation. I think we need to kind of make it part of it. And not everybody is reading the scripture. So it's like, hey, have you read this? This is what the Gita quotes. You should read this. Or, it's like, oh, you shouldn't be, correct them. I've had friends who sometimes, I don't even think they realize that it's coming, so naturally to them. I was like, oh, XYZ is looking for a boy or a girl, they want to get married, and they are discussed. And right there, I stop them and correct them. It's like, I don't need to know that. Let's not, why do we include that in our discussion, right? So I think even that, those little changes, will bring a change. And obviously, people need to learn more, read more, know more. Nowadays, it's so much easier if people don't want to read books. I mean, I'm a big research geek, so I love reading. But even for those who don't like to read, there's so much out there available on social media that you can watch, listen to podcasts, right? And learn more about it if you want to. And you made a good point. Yes, I mean, caste is obviously commonly always associated with Hinduism because of the historical and cultural roots in our society. But if you think of social stratifications and discrimination based on birth and status, we see that happening in varying degrees in all sorts of culture. So like if you think of Sikhism, I have seen, uh, there seems to be some kind of hierarchy and caste like division within the Sikh communities too. They may not call it caste, but it exists. When, like I said, when they're discussing marriage and things like that. But if you go based on the teachings of Sikhism, Sikh gurus explicitly reject caste distinction, right? They speak against caste, but people are still practicing. Same goes for Buddhism. And I know that Dr. Ambedkar embraced Buddhism, but I mean, there are also certain principles in Buddhism that he was against. So Buddhism, you know, it originated as a reaction against the hierarchical caste system of Hinduism, I think. And it talked about, you know, spiritual enlightenment, and that's great. But if you see, I've heard of you know, examples in Sri Lanka, Nepal, where social hierarchies based on birth and occupation have persisted despite Buddhist teachings advocating for equality. Islam, it is a monotheistic religion. They don't have a formal caste system, but if you see Muslim majority societies, there is social stratification based on ethnicity, tribe, lineage, right? That is caste-like division if you think about it. So South Asia, Middle East, we see you know, social discrimination and marginalization based on birth and lineage. And like Dr. Kak said, Christianity too, similar to Islam, we do not call it a caste system, but it is inherent in some of their teachings. You know, where Christianity has been historically dominant, there is social stratification based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. So yes, we get maligned because of the caste word, but in, I think, and we need to move away from it, because I think Sanatan Dharma is, you know, so much more evolved in that sense, right? So yes, we need to, but like I said, all these other cultures and religions also preach against it, but people do practice hierarchy and social stratification. So I think we have to also move away from that. Yes, you know, it's thrown at us, and you know, the word is exploited against Hindus, but I find that is, there's a whole different reason and layer behind that.
And people need to watch the Atman show episode on the caste system.
So that people think Atman is the main thing.
Right, absolutely.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying. I don't even know if I'm making any sense.
So yeah, okay, so I just want to go into something, the recent election, like in India, right? So BJP and Modi and all, they were like mostly, you know, they kind of advocated for building Ram Mandir, like it's the like it is the most important thing. But in Ayodhya and you know that place, BJP lost mostly because of caste. So what do you have to say on that? Like, do you think that Indian people are really not thinking at all?
So I don't know. Dr. Kak, you may know better. This is just my take on things as a layman. I was watching, and I'm trying to think, was it the emissary on his channel? I was reading an article or watching a video. He it was an interesting statement he made, and I made a note of that. It says that you know, Indians don't cast their vote; they vote their castes. I think that's what happened even in UP, right? That's what happened. That's what I'm saying. Caste keeps getting weaponized, be it in
Yeah,
academia or politics. It keeps it's so true. It's
yeah.
so true. So this whole, I mean, I'll let you speak and I'll add more. But I mean, that's just what popped to
Yeah.
mind, Dr. Kak.
So what is your take on this one?
Well, when it comes to politics, it's generally a whole set of complex issues. See, for example, there were some people very unhappy from what I hear in Ayodhya or in Banaras, that when land was acquired and houses were broken down, maybe it wasn't properly organized. You know, maybe the government was too high-handed, that you want to expand this. And I think that's where more thought needs to uh, be put in. Now, how do we do it? Or can the government do whatever it wants? So maybe that was a factor. And then there were other factors such as, you know, people were afraid that maybe some major changes will take place in the constitution or whatever. The whole question of also minorities, you know, the big religious minority divide. And that is quite a substantial um, fraction of the population, UP, maybe 20% or 25%. So I think the polity in India has to work even harder to embrace everybody, to bring in everybody, to make everybody feel that we are all equal and focus and therefore to be focused into the future. And especially as India becomes even more successful internationally, India is already the world's fifth largest economy, is expected to become the fourth next year as it overtakes Japan. And 2 years later, it's going to be the third largest economy, US, China, and India. So given all of that and the enormous success of the diaspora Indians all over the world, clearly Indians need to be more confident and go beyond colonial lens, which has been used even in administration within India. So we need to create a new way of dealing with the complexity of issues within India, not just necessarily look at these problems from the simplistic binary that colonial administrators during the British times created. So I think that might open up. And just to give you an example, people all over the world, including scholars, and I was at a meeting just 2 or 3 days ago, are shocked when they hear that in India, a secular country, Hindus don't have the same rights as other religions. Hindus are not allowed to run their own temples. Can you imagine it? Isn't it shameful that we, after 70 odd years of freedom, have not dealt with that problem? Hindus don't have the same rights as other religions in India. People can't believe it, but it's true.
Yeah, very true. Many don't know about this. You're right. I mean, I was watching a video, and I think was some time back, and I think was a slogan. I could be wrong by ink. What is it? I wrote it down. When I come across such terms and quotes and words, I write it down because it sticks with me. I think it says something like "Jitni abadi utna hak."
Haq. This was
Right?
a slogan coined by Rahul Gandhi,
Ah,
Jitni Abadi Utna Haq. So
right.
that you have to look at every details and see is it proportional to the caste divisions within India. If you did that, you'll find that, well, maybe the proportion of students in Western universities is not according to the ethnicities within America, right? Maybe this, I mean, these are destructive, simplistic ideas, and
Very.
people don't understand
Very
that.
No. See, when caste comes in, I feel Dr. Kak and Anamika is that the logic goes out of the window. People become, and so you're so right. When I heard that slogan, I watched the video and I was hearing to the examples. I'm like, oh my God, this is a very slippery slope. It's not going to go down well if, because it to me it's like the death of merit. It's like the slogan literally, and he gave that example. To your point, he talked about. It says the Dalits failed the IIT exam because the papers are set by Brahmins or something like that. And he gave an equivalent of the SATs here, saying that the white people, were doing really well in this SAT scores. So one of the professors, and I'm just summarizing the long discussion he had, he proposed the African Americans to put that together, and they saw success because the Spanish speaking people and the African Americans were not faring well, but the whites were, because he was making this example. And so this again, it's scary, and what scared me more is the people listening were clapping. So here I thought, oh my, right, like they are accepting this, they are clapping, and they agree with what he's saying. That is very dangerous, what's being proposed. And it brings us back to that whole, the critical race theory, which they started to synonymously use as critical caste theory, which is, I mean, Rajiv Malhotra has done, written and spoken so much about it. But that is again very dangerous, and we are seeing that in institutions here, which concerns us, because critical race theory is not critical caste theory, but that's how they are selling it.
But critical race theory has also taken the so-called Vokes to the idea that math itself is a racist discipline.
Yes.
So you should not teach math in middle school because certain communities are going to do better. And therefore, we have to ensure that the outcomes are the same. It doesn't really matter
Indians
what the
will do
people are.
better
Yeah,
in
yeah.
fact.
Right.
No, he's right. We are hearing this. It's very scary. I mean, I don't know, and it's getting worse because there are people. I believe that we don't have much representation or people speaking in three large areas. One is media, one is academia, and politics, right? So this is where all the narratives flow from, and we don't have spokespeople who can in those areas saying, hey, this is wrong, let's not do this. So yeah, you're right, absolutely, they're saying that about math. And I mean, I'm a mother and I see what's going on in schools, and it deeply concerns me. It deeply concerns me.
Right. And as you said, we are in the age of Kali Yuga, the
Huh.
age of confusion.
Yeah.
So this is what it is, and confusion is all around us.
Yeah. And there was a time when education was, at least from what I know, because both my parents are from academia, and it was about, I was always raised to understand education is something that allows you, how to think. Now education's become about what to think, right? And they use this catchphrase called "catch them young," which is what they're doing. They're doing exactly that. So we're seeing examples every day. We're hearing about examples every day from parents, and I volunteer with school boards. I speak to a lot of parents and um, teachers, and it's troubling. It's troubling.
It's troubling. Also, the gender issue, the confusion about gender, which has become such a dangerous thing in American and maybe Canadian schools. And uh, and so, I think the whole world is facing tremendous issues. And then in the United States, they are spending money as if there's no future.
Yeah.
Every 3 months, they are taking in $1 trillion of debt.
Yep.
And we don't know how long this whole game is going to last. We don't know.
No. And I mean, I don't know if this exists. Maybe you might have heard. I have not heard a term exist. So, I'm going to, I'm just saying this, that I want to maybe share or coin a term and patent it if it's never been used before. But from what Dr. Kak just said about the caste fluidity, right? It's real. It's happening. And I mean, gender fluidity. So I always say, if there can be gender fluidity, why can't there be caste fluidity? Right. So my husband actually, so we joke about it. I'm like, that's a very interesting concept, because people, if you can accept gender fluidity, then I mean,
You mean
class.
in the same day, you
Yeah.
can be, this is what
Yeah.
gender fluidity means. And in
Yes.
fact, I believe in the German parliament, they have instituted a new law
Yeah.
that every year you can change your gender on your
Yeah. Yeah.
passport
Yeah.
if you so want.
Yeah.
So why can't you change your caste,
So
whatever
that's
it
it.
means,
So
every day, so many times? You can have a
yeah.
different caste
Why
certificate.
not? So this was brilliant, because I used to come home when the whole school board was, discussing. There was an actual motion passed, and it was deeply concerning. And we all went in. I remember we were there since morning till late night. There was protest happening. I was filming that, and then we went inside where they were actually, going to vote on the motion. We sat there. It was so frustrating, because we were sitting there. We all knew this is so wrong, but we didn't have the permission to speak. It was a voting, and we had to sit there listening to everything that was going wrong. And I feel like these are very powerful people who have a lot of power as a board member in a school. They're casting votes on a concept they have no clarity about. This is so scary. This is going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
impact our
yeah.
future
That's what.
generations.
Yeah, that's what I say. Like, people here they said Seattle became the first
Mm.
American city to ban caste discrimination. But do you know what is caste and
Nope.
how you're passing the laws? And do you even have the knowledge? Have you even read Bhagavad Gita? So, I mean, this is really dangerous. Like people passing laws and stuff when they really don't have the proper knowledge.
And we know for sure, this is not even at least in my experience here, is like, we know for sure. We had board members come out and accept and tell us that, I don't know enough about this to vote on it, but I'm voting on it. And I'm like, oh my god, this impacts our future generations, our children. Because imagine now a kid going up to another kid in recess and saying, hey, what's your caste? Like, they've never even heard the word caste.
Yeah.
But there have been trustees who have confided and told us that, yeah, we don't know enough about it, but I'm going to vote on this motion today. So this is why when Dr. Kak brought up the gender fluidity, it brought back the conversation, because I used to come home and I'd be so frustrated saying, what can we do about this? This is so wrong. And that's when my husband said that, well, you need to start talking about caste fluidity. And I'm like, oh my God, we need to patent this term. So it's on your show. I'm claiming it if no one has said this before. Caste fluidity, that is so much more easier because we already do it. So if someone says, who are you? Hey, I mean, I identify as a Dalit today. I identify as a Brahmin tomorrow. Why not?
Yeah. And also, I
Totally
think we're
agree.
giving more weightage of with all this in India. Like we have these reservations,
Mm.
20% OBC, 10% SC, ST. So, what do you think? You think you need to be ban on that as well?
Well, I believe in Tamil Nadu, reservation is 97%. In the general category is only 3%.
My
But
God.
fortunately, while they were doing it, there was one place all the Tamil Nadu Brahmins could go. They went to the West and they conquered the West, right? Now, the problem is for the poor whites in the West. I believe the incoming class at Johns Hopkins University, which is America's first research university,
Mm.
was only 16% whites, 16% African Americans, 20% Hispanics, and 30% Asians, and some international students. So poor whites in America are finding it very difficult to get anywhere. The whole deck is stacked against them. This is terrible. Now, in Tamil Nadu or in India, the Brahmins could leave and go to the West, and it was open. It was meritocracy. Now, what are the poor whites going to do in the West? I don't know. It's a very sad situation.
They'll have reservation now.
Yeah, it is. You want to give support to the marginalized communities who have suffered over the years economically, give them access to education, bring them up to par to everybody. There is no room for discrimination in that sense. But this is one area where I feel it should be ruled by meritocracy should, when it comes to, there's nothing to do with it. I mean, 97% reservation, I did not know that.
In Tamil Nadu,
Ooh.
97% reservation.
Wow. Yeah, and the situation like over here is the same with what they're talking about, white privilege, right? And for us, we are like, we are compared to that. So we are the oppressors. As Hindus, we are considered the oppressors. But oppression happened on us, no? By the British and the Mughals. How are we oppressors? Like it's a caste 22. We are either way we are doomed.
Yeah.
um, it's bad.
Okay, another word that phrase we should patent is caste 22.
There we go. So we've gone two phases here today.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. It was an amazing discussion. Before I let you go, do you have anything to say about my show, The Atman Show, Subhash and Sangita? Yeah.
I only want to say Atman is the solution because everybody has the same Atman within them, and therefore go to the Atman through the Atman show.
Oh, how do I top that now?
Yeah.
I will have to echo. I will have to echo Dr. Kak's the thoughts, and I said that earlier too. I think that returning to the concept of Atman, which is the name of your show, this is such a central tenet of Hindu philosophy, right? And so we need to do that more. And I think not just for us, abolishing the caste system because we're talking about that, but it's great for the entire world. Sanatan Dharma has a lot to give back in terms of that. So yeah, great show. Keep bringing these topics to people's attention is all I can say. And thank you for inviting me as well and allowing me to join this show with Dr. Kak, who I really respect and look up to.
All right. Bye. Namaste.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.